Well, before we begin the Bible study, welcome everyone. I'd also like to welcome all of our brethren online around the world. And because this is a live stream and they may be watching, I wanted to say hi Mum, hi Dad, and also hi Mom and hi Dad as well, because both of my sets of parents are here in the church. But let's begin. I want you to think about yourself and just how likable you are. Think about where you would put yourself on a scale or a grade of 1 to 10. Now, just to set the scene here, I'm not asking you whether you are likable, because I can tell you that you're all likable. You're all very, very likable people. God's people in general are very likable. I'm asking how much. Would you be a 3 out of 10? Maybe a 5 out of 10? Mr. Garb, I think I'm an 11.5 out of 10. Now, in this, just to make it a little more complicated, I want you to think about your best friends. Now, the whole thing about our best friends is that they are our friends because of the fact that they already see us as being very likable. So I want you to think about people who are not your best friends. People who you may know a little bit, but not necessarily all that much. Does everyone that you know like you? Think about your classmates, some of your work colleagues. Does everyone in the local congregation and your church congregation like you? How long, it's obviously easy for our friends to like us, but how long would it typically take for someone who we're just meeting to begin to like us for the very first time? These are all very good questions, and they are a better indication of how likable we really are than just how our friends react to us. Now, if you want to be really highly likable, here's an even greater challenge. Are you able to get people who don't necessarily like you to like you? Now, here's a little exercise. Try writing down the name of someone on your piece of paper there who doesn't necessarily like you. It's someone it's not someone who we're not talking about the absolute evil of the world. Think about somebody who's a little more difficult to get along with. Someone who maybe you suspect doesn't necessarily like you. It could be someone in the church, if you can't think of anyone in the church. It could be someone who you have to interact with on a daily basis, maybe at work. It could be somebody in your class at school. Now, the real challenge for likability is, do you think you could make that particular person come to like you? Now, think of another name. Think of someone who you don't necessarily like. Now, you can think of any name here, but not mine. You may want to avoid writing down the name of the person sitting beside you as well, just in case they glance across at your notes. And once you've got those names, you can pass them forward and I'll share them with the group. No, I would never do that. I would be the most unliked person in this entire room. So chances are that just writing down those names would make you feel very uncomfortable. And the reason for that is every one of us likes to be liked. We all have this intrinsic desire to be liked. I certainly have this desire. I've had it all of my life. And it's uncomfortable and an unnatural kind of thing to be thinking about people who may not necessarily like us, or people who we may not necessarily like as well. But think about those people, whether you've been brave enough to write them on your piece of paper or not. They're going to be etched in your mind through the rest of this Bible study. Think about them. What do you think makes you unlikable to them? Or what are the things that actually make them not necessarily likable to you? Now keep in mind that we're all going to have an eternal future in the family of God. We're going to be in the God family forever. At some point, if we're all in the God family, we're going to have to be able to be friends with that person. We're going to have to be able to get along together. And if that's the case, when are we going to build those relationships? And so those names are what should really motivate us to become more likable. A true test of likability is if we can take this person who we don't necessarily like and actually come to like them. And that part is entirely up to us. But an even greater test is to take someone who doesn't like us and win them over so that they do, because that is entirely up to them as well as us. Let's take our Bibles, and the first verse we'll turn to is Proverbs chapter 11, verse 30. We're still setting the subject of likability. Proverbs chapter 11, and we will read verse 30. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that wins souls is wise. Now wisdom, we know that wisdom is applying the principles from God's word. So he that wins souls is going to be using the principles from this Bible on your laps. That's what we're going to look at today, those Bible principles. But what if you could win them over? Everyone needs to have a reason to like us. And there are huge advantages to having people come to like us quickly. You think about you're a new camper. You're coming to camp for the first time. The thing that's going to be foremost on your mind is everyone going to like me? And my wife and I, we don't have so much to do with the Ambassador Youth Camp, but we have had campers come and stay with us. We host regularly prior to the camp. And you can imagine what's one of the foremost things on our mind. I hope they like us. If they're going to be staying with us, I hope they come to like us. They'll be with us for a day or two in our homes. Think about a job interview. You've finished all of your schooling, all of the training that you've done. You go into this job interview. Now you've got a wonderful resume, and so you've been narrowed down from, say, 200 applicants for this job to just 5 people that are going to be interviewed. And then you have to sit across this table from 2 or 3 people that you've never met before, that don't know you at all. And then the one thing that's going to decide for you whether you obtain that position or not is at the end of that interview they're going to say, well, who do you like out of the applicants? And why do you like this person? Why should we employ this applicant? They're all very qualified. Why should we employ this applicant rather than this other applicant? You could be a first-time counsellor at camp, and you'll be thinking, I hope the youth that I'm going to be guiding and helping through this camp, I hope they're going to like me as well. So, as lights to this world, our challenge is to become as likable as we can to everyone we come into contact with, everybody around us. And whether you want to be able to be more likable to people outside of your or my circle of friends, or try to win over a foe, you may be thinking by now, how can I become more likable? Well, that's what we're going to look into this Bible study. How we can all become even more likable than we already are. Now, there's a good reason why not everyone is ever going to be our friends. And that's because everybody's different. Not everybody is the same as us. Not everyone's going to have the exact same things in common as what we do. That's a very basic, simple fact. And especially that person on your page who may not like you, and maybe because simply they don't have as much in common with you. So the first point here is realize everyone is different and change your approach. Realize that everyone is different and change your approach. Now, being different is actually a good thing. You imagine how boring this world would be if we were all clones. We're all Mr. Raymond Garb. What a boring world that would be. There is only one of you and there is only one of me. And this world does not need another Raymond Garb. I'm glad that there's room for one of us here on this earth. But you could even ask my wife, who also happens to be my best friend, and she would say, no, there doesn't need to be more than one of you. She loves me, but one of me is enough. And the great thing about best friends is that you've found a lot in common, haven't you? You've got the same, similar likes, dislikes. You enjoy the same activities. You might share the same sense of humour, but not everybody's like that. And with those people who you hardly know, you're not going to find out whether you have anything in common, really, until you actually get to know them better. But it is a simple fact that you're not going to have a lot in common with everyone. We just aren't. We're just so different, and that's life. But we can still be likeable to everyone that we come into contact with, whether or not we do have a lot in common. And there's a very important principle that will help us with that, and that's in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Because some people are experts at getting people who don't come from the same background, that don't have the same likes, don't have the same dislikes, have many differences, expert at getting them to like them. And Paul was one of those people. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and we'll begin reading in verse 19. For though I be free from all men, yet have I made myself servant unto all. He had the servant mentality, that I may gain the more. He was all about trying to gain people to actually like him, so that he could work with them and then influence them. Obviously, he was preaching the gospel. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. So when he was talking to a Jew, he was trying to think about what that Jew's background was like. What are the kinds of things that would interest them? What were the kinds of things that would be able to grab, he could say, that would grab that person's attention and take their interest and then be able to hold their interest? To them that are under the law, that's under the ceremonial law, those who believe that the ceremonial law should still be kept, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. That's a misunderstanding that they had, but he needed to be able to relate to them in order to be able to gain them and then be able to show them the correct understanding. To them that are without law, as without law, without that ceremonial law. Now here's the very important part, being not without law to God. So Paul, no matter how he related to people, he was never without keeping God's law himself. He was always going to maintain, regardless of the person that he was talking to, the godly standards that he knew were very important in his life. So he never ever compromised in this. Even though he was relating to people and coming to them from their own perspective, he would never ever compromise God's law in his own life and the way that he did that. But under the law to Christ, he was going to keep the law, that I might gain them that are without law. Verse 22, to the weak became I as weak. Now you can imagine, someone who's very weak and timid, and you're getting to know them. The last thing you're going to do is try and force them to get up and sing karaoke in front of a large group of people. That's not the approach for a weak person. You sit down and have a quiet conversation with somebody who's shy. And that's the kind of approach that Paul did on a ministerial kind of basis with these who were weak of the world, that I might gain the weak. I made all things to all men, so it didn't matter which background that person actually came from. He was trying to relate to them, that I might by all means save some. So he knew he wouldn't always succeed, and that's the same with us, trying to build relationships with people. Sometimes we won't succeed, but his goal was to save some. We're not going to be able to make every single last person that we feel doesn't like us come to like us, but if we can make some of them come to like us, we're gaining, aren't we? And the thing is that he wasn't always that way, because he says in verse 22, to the weak became I as weak. He wasn't always able to interact with them as being weak. He had actually become that way. And then he also says, I am made all things to all men. So it's something that he had to work on. It took some time to actually work on that for him. And it's obviously going to take some time for us to work on as well. And the thing is, it's not the fact is that you're not already doing this, because we all are. You think about the ways that you're already interacting with different people. Think of how you would hold an engaging conversation with your best friend versus myself as a minister, for example. It would be a different kind of approach and a different kind of conversation, as opposed to one of your parents. Once again, a very different kind of approach to your conversation. As opposed to an older member of the church, you're going to come towards to them and talk about different kind of topics with different people. It's very simple and very, very obvious. As opposed to someone at camp who you've never met before, getting to know them for the first time. Different approaches. But if we can find that we can relate to people, if we are relatable, it becomes very, very easy to form connections. And it's the basis is finding out what they're about. Everyone is different, but we're only going to find out more about them by talking to them, by talking about what interests them. And so that leads us on to the second point: show real interest in the other person. Show real interest in the other person, including that person on your page who may not like you. And showing interest is the single best way to become likable to people. It's if you go into on the internet and look at what relationship gurus or conversation gurus are talking about, this is what they say is the single most important way to become likable. And it's based on showing real interest. So we need to, when we're talking to somebody, we need to show that we're actually genuinely interested in them. It's an interest that if it's fake, if it's put on, if there's any personal agendas involved, people are going to see through that. So people are very, very good at being able to see hypocrisy. And so it has to actually be based on us internally actually wanting to know more about this person, actually being interested in them. And being able to do this is going to quickly provide or create a likable connection. Are you the type of person that can go into the grocery store and while the lady at the checkout is scanning your groceries, you start a conversation and you leave with them liking you? It can happen very, 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 very quickly. Let's turn to Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2 and verse 4. In Philippians chapter 2 and verse 4, look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. Now, some people in the world, even superficially, are good at doing this. I had to get a filling a couple of weeks ago, and so I went to the dentist. And he was very good at becoming likable by showing interest in the other person. And we struck up a conversation. It was more of a one-way conversation because I had begin with, I was anaesthetised and one side of my mouth. I was drooling. I had this thing clamping my mouth open, and he had this drill in his hand going in and out. And but he was striking up a conversation. It was at the least opportune moment, he'd say something like, "So tell me about New Zealand," and I'd be trying to connect, and then periodically I'd wash my mouth out and be able to spit, and then I'd try and get a couple sentences in. But in between all of that, we had a really good conversation. We found out that we both like Florida. We'd been to Florida. He was talking about different places in the US that had been national parks, and we talked about travelling to Australia. And it was the best conversation that I've ever had while sitting in the dentist chair. Now, it was because he knew how to be likable by showing interest in me. And we can do this with our conversations with other people as well. The key is not talking about ourselves, but finding out what interests the other person, talking about things that actually they like. Focus on getting to know them. And if you are one of those people who happens to be a shy person, I have a background of being a shy person. The key to overcome shyness is to focus on the other person rather than on yourself. And the gurus call this the spotlight effect. You can be in the middle of a conversation, and then all of a sudden you're worried about what this other person is actually thinking of you, and it's like you've got this big spotlight on you, and you're cowering away. But all you have to do is take your focus off yourself and focus on the other person, and just really getting to know them. And the fact is that when our desire to get to know the other person is greater than our worrying about ourselves, the fear that we have will just melt away. Now, these conversations, this is an interrogation with the other person where we're just asking questions because that can be strange as well. It's sharing as well. So find areas where we can relate and share our own experiences at the same time. And providing some information about ourselves helps to build trust with the other person as well. If we're just learning all about them and say nothing about ourselves, it starts to look a little suspicious after a while. But everyone's got their interests. Once you get to know somebody's interests, it becomes a conversation button to press. A lot of people, that button might be their pet. How's your pet doing? What's the latest thing that you've trained your pet to do? That type of thing. I had an interesting conversation with someone in this room a little while ago, and they knew that my conversation button was, "What are your plans for the community garden this year?" Now, I could have just stopped and talked for 3 hours and bored the person on that, but it started the conversation. Or kept the conversation going. That was the important thing. And if we're able to do that with people who don't necessarily like us, or we feel that we don't get along so well with, they will eventually get to know the real you. Because the real you, I can tell you, is likable. I know that it is likable. And they just simply have this picture of you that isn't the real you. They've seen, there's been something that someone might have said that was slightly offensive to the other that they didn't mean to say. And this whole picture has been built in this person's mind over that one interaction or a couple of interactions. The more they get to know you, the more they will get to know the real you. So, back to this verse. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. What are their interests? What are their needs? Let's go back to verse 3 now. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind. This is thinking of the other person ahead of us. Let each esteem other better than themselves. So this is a great way of leveling the relationship with another person. We would never want to look down at another person, and everybody has their own strengths and weaknesses. But the only way we're ever going to learn those and begin to appreciate them is to be able to talk to people and to get to know them. So not everyone is going to be a close friend, but even so, whether or not they are, we can still be friendly to everyone. It is a very tough situation, a very tough thing to be left out. Now it's also important how we say things. Let's turn to Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6. Colossians chapter 4 and verse 6. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. You've had dishes that are bland before. You have dinner, someone forgot to add the salt, they forgot to add all the herbs. It's just boring. It's just a boring dish. You're eating it just to survive rather than because it's some delicious delight that someone's presented to you. So that's what our speech needs to be like as well. It just not boring. There's the danger of becoming overly familiar with people. Now, I want to talk about myself here a little bit because I could be coming into services on the Sabbath. I have my Bible bag in my hand, and I walk past one of you in the corridor and I say, "Hello, how are you doing?" Now, you know that I'm not actually going to stop for a conversation and find out how you're doing. How are you doing while I'm passing by that's not a meaningful kind of statement. And then imagine if you were actually going to respond to that. If it wasn't an awkward question to begin with. Mr. Garb, have you got 3 hours? What am I going to do? Am I going to go through every aspect of my life and go through this part of my life, that part of my life, and explain how I'm doing in every one of those areas? It's not a great question. That the reason why someone would ask it is not because they actually want to know how the person is doing, but how that they want to actually at least let the person know that they are in the background interested in how they're doing, but not the specifics of how they're doing at that point in time. Now imagine that instead of asking that question, my Bible bag's down, I'm not walking past, we had more of a conversation like, so how are your classes going? What was the most interesting, you would respond, and then I could ask, what was the most interesting thing that you learned this last week? Now that's a question that could stimulate some conversation. What is the most challenging thing that you've had to do in class this week? Now those types of questions, those are leading questions. Those are questions that don't just lead to an answer like, very well, thank you, Mr. Garb. Those are questions that lead to actual conversation. You're starting to explain why you like this, or why it was interesting to you, why it was hard for you, and then that can lead on to deeper questions and questions in response, and a really interesting conversation. Another thing to keep in mind is that when we do have those conversations, the next time you see that person, follow up. Well, I heard your dog wasn't well. How's the dog doing this week? And that shows that that we are interested in them, that we haven't actually forgotten about the last point. We can pick up a conversation every time we meet, pretty much where we left it the last time, or some part of where we'd reached the last time. Now the next point: be kind to everyone, including that person on your list who may not like you. Be kind to everyone, including that person who may not like you. People will know that we're truly interested in them if we're kind to them. Now, at this point in the Bible study, I can tell the ladies that you can just sit back and relax at this point in time. We're going to turn to a verse that only applies to the men here. So you can listen in if you're interested. But Proverbs chapter 19. Proverbs chapter 19. This is some wonderful advice to men. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 22. The desire or the attractiveness of a man is his kindness. So, gentlemen, if you want to be attractive, the way to do that is to be kind. And the reason for that is that it shows that you really care. You really care about that person you're being kind to. And there is the phenomenon in romantic relationships of gift giving, where the man tries to impress the woman. He's giving the woman gifts, flowers, chocolates, whatever it is. And that's to try and impress the woman. Obviously, he's wanting to show that he's interested in the woman through these acts of kindness. But an observant woman will look at that man and say, is he just being kind to me with these gifts that he's giving me, or is he kind to everybody? Because if he's kind to everybody, that's his actual nature. That's what this man is actually like. So, gentlemen, it comes back to you. Are you kind to everybody? Because that is giving a wide impression to a lot of people on how attractive you are. Now, I'm sure that you ladies were enjoyed that, the fact that I was able to help these men in this Bible study, and because of course you're interested not in your own things but the things of others, of course, as we read in that other scripture. But there's also a verse for you as well. So if you can turn to Proverbs chapter 31. Now, Proverbs chapter 31, I would call the picture of the perfect woman. So this is the perfect woman. Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 10. Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. So this is a priceless woman, and then there's all these attributes that are relatable. How many women actually go out and buy a vineyard these days and plant it with their own hands? These are all aspects. These are all qualities that are translatable from the actual examples in this chapter to real life examples in this world today. It's obviously a very capable woman who's capable of all sorts of different things. But then you come down to verse 26. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. So this law of kindness, this kindness applies to women as well. Now, men, you all know whether a woman is truly kind, not just by the fact that she is kind to one particular person, but is she actually kind to everybody? Can you see this person being kind to everybody? That shows that they are a kind person. And that should be the way that we are to everybody. It is a law. People actually notice whether we really care. Turn to Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. And verse 10. Romans chapter 12 and verse 10. Be kindly affectioned one to another, with brotherly love and honour, preferring one another. So this kindness, it's showing an affection, a right kind of affection to other people. It doesn't have to be a romantic affection. It's an affection of just being interested simply in the other person, this brotherly love. Brotherly love is this outflowing love. It's applying God's give way of life, outflowing concern for one another, and showing honour to other people as well. Now, there are all sorts of needs that people may have, and we're looking after the interests and needs of other people. There are physical needs. People may need help around the house or help in their garden, but there are also emotional needs as well. And there are some people who are great at physically serving. They'll serve and serve and serve and serve, help everyone that they can, but never take the time to actually build an emotional connection, an actual relationship with the person that they're sharing. I learned a really important lesson from my father-in-law a few years back, and we happened to be helping a person. They needed to have some yard work done. And I was there to assist him. He was the expert at doing the things that he needed to do. I was just really there to help out. And we got all the work finished. And then this person invited us to sit down for a cup of coffee. And so we obliged, and we had a cup of coffee, and we had a very long conversation. I was thinking, I've got all these other tasks to do this afternoon. I don't really have time for this, but I want to be polite. And then at the end of this whole conversation, he made a very interesting statement that went something along the lines of, with a person like so-and-so, this person that we've just seen, when you go to their house and you actually help them, your work is only half done. The other half of the job is actually talking to this person. This person, lives alone. This person doesn't get to talk to people very often. And so you're serving this person as much through talking with them and the conversation that you have after doing the job as the actual physical task that you've done. And that really struck me. Now let's turn to Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4. Serving through that fellowship is true kindness. It's showing a true interest in the person, not just their immediate need, but the actual person themselves. Ephesians chapter 4. We'll read verse 32. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 32. And be you kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another. Now, this tender-hearted is soft-hearted. Just have a heart that is actually interested in people. That actually you can be moved emotionally to actually help them and talk to them. Forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. God is willing to forgive us for any grievance, any and every grievance that we have ever committed. He has this wonderful, incredible forgiving nature towards us. But we also need to be willing to forgive others at the same time. So part of that is putting some of those things, whatever this person that we may not necessarily like, behind us, and being willing to get to know them and work with them. Now here's another point. Point number 4. Be dependable, regardless of whether the person likes you. So be dependable, regardless of whether the person likes you. We can have a great personality, but along with that, we also need to have credibility to really be truly likable, and need to be the type of person that person can actually rely on, whenever they need it. Turn to Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3. Verses 3 to 4. Now this scripture is going to take a little explaining. This is probably the most awkwardly worded scripture in this entire Bible study, but bear with me. Proverbs chapter 3 and verses 3 to 4. I'm going to have to translate a couple words here to more obvious modern English translation. Proverbs chapter 3 and verse 3, let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them about your neck, write them upon the table of your heart. So shall you find favour and good understanding in the sight of God and man. Now, what this is talking about in verse 4 is finding favour. This is ways to find favour. And favour is being likeable. So the preceding verse 3, is talking about these things, and there are actually 2 things in this verse that are absolutely required for us in order to be likeable. In verse 4, so shall you find favour. Now the first one of them is called mercy. Now that word mercy is kindness. That's what we just covered. So let not this kindness forsake you. And then the second word is truth. Now truth is reliableness. Being genuine, it means being genuine and dependable. So we need to be kind, but we also have to be reliable and dependable. There's no point offering to help somebody if we don't turn up to help them, obviously. And there are a lot of examples of that, but people have to be able to rely on us on being there. If we say we're going to be at a certain place at a certain time, for example, making sure that we're there. Now, another personal example, I have a background habit that showed itself a lot more in my earlier years, that I always seemed to be late. I was that person that always seemed to be 5 minutes late for work. Now, I had a work colleague, the work colleague that I worked with the most often. He had the opposite habit. He would always turn up to work 15 minutes early, and I'd turn up to work 5 minutes late, feeling bad. I'd just driven in an hour in busy traffic, and always seemed to leave, until I actually realised the fact that, if I want to arrive on time and I'm always 5 minutes late, why don't I leave home 5 minutes earlier? In which case I'll arrive on time. It took a while for me to sink in, and then it was a habit that I needed to overcome. But it's not rocket science. But sometimes these habits are very, very hard to be able to break. Now, this other employee, he arrived 15 minutes early, but he'd leave 15 minutes early. He would take numerous coffee breaks through the day, and I would always work extra late to make up that extra time that I didn't arrive on time. But the impression that my boss got was that this other employee is always early and he's diligent, and Mr. Raymond Garb, is a very young man, is always 5 minutes late. And I bet if you could ask that employer, if you could change one thing about this young employee of yours, what would it be? He would say, I would like him to be able to arrive to work on time every morning. Just that one thing, that a little character fault like that can actually make a big difference on how truly likable you are. So keep that in mind. We need to be kind, as we've already learned, and as the first part of verse 3 says. But we also need to have truth. We need to be real, and we need to be dependable about it as well. Now, point number 5. So there's still the elephant in the room. This person that may not like you, and we can probably think of dozens of people like this. the work colleagues, that person who walks into the office and just the entire office mood just drops. You think, this person's always depressed. That same work colleague that I had had a habit of when things went wrong, he'd just lose it. He'd lose control of his emotions. And some people are like that. There are people who learn to control their emotions when they're 2 or 3. There are people who reach adulthood and they're still having these little temper tantrums every time that something goes wrong. They just are not able to hold themselves together. And with people like that we come into contact with, or may not be able to avoid, point number 5, build bridges whenever possible with those who do not like you. You think about a bridge, what a bridge actually does, and a bridge will connect 2 divided areas of land together. So you have this piece, and you have that piece. There's no way to get across. Then you build this bridge, and then there's this way of transportation. There's this way of things starting to flow back and forth, and it brings those 2 areas back together again. That's what we need to do with people. Build that bridge with people. Hebrews chapter 12. And verse 14, Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 14. Follow peace with all men. Now that word follow actually means pursue. So not just follow peace with all men, but pursue peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. Now you've seen movies with an action movie with a pursuit, with a chase scene. You've got the villain running away and the hero's chasing them, and they're driving down side roads and they're on their tail, and they're trying to get away, and this person is just focused on catching them. They're pursuing them everywhere that they go. That's the kind of attitude that we should have, the perspective that we should have with pursuing peace with people. If there's a person that we're not at peace with, that we should be at peace with, some people are. It still will. You'll find that you're never able to make peace with this person, but it shouldn't stop you from trying. Pursue it at all the time, at all costs, just like an action movie pursuit. Try and find out why they are the way they are. Why they don't necessarily like you. In the case of this fellow employee, it was just simply lack of emotional control. Wasn't focused towards me or anything else. He would just get frustrated with the situation and he'd just fall apart. There are people like that, but it could be something more sinister. It could actually be a work colleague who's actually, or a school colleague who is into social climbing. They get this. They feel they get this benefit of putting the other person down so that they can somehow increase their own status in the eyes of other people. They look better by making other people look worse. And so, but regardless of whether it's something very simple or whether it's something more deliberate, we're dealing with people. We're dealing with humans, with carnal human minds, and being able to know what the reason is behind their behaviour can be very, very helpful with being able to relate with them. So we pursue this piece. Now, one of the ways that we do that is in Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. As I say, it's not always going to work, but Romans chapter 12 is very interesting. Verses 20 to 21. Therefore, if your enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in so doing you shall heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. So there may come a situation, wherever you are, where you can actually help this person. It might be just in a simple, small way. With this work employee, if he was, he was a mechanic, so if he was really struggling with this machine, I'd simply say, can I give you a hand with that? He may be struggling to actually lift something or loosen a bolt, or there may be something small that I can do to actually assist him. And then just me helping him would actually calm him down. It could be like that with any of your, with any of these people that you find difficult to get along with. If you can find something very small, maybe it's time for them to have as a coffee break. It's time for them to have a cup of coffee. You get them a cup of coffee. This is unexpected. This is the person that they perceive. They probably perceive that you don't like them, as well as the fact that they don't like you. And then all of a sudden you've given them a cup of coffee. Unless they're thinking, well, what's in this coffee? Has it been laced with something? It's going to put them. It's going to set them back, isn't it? They're going to think, well, maybe this person isn't so bad after all. And that's why it says here, for in so doing you shall heap coals of fire on his head. That helping them, finding small ways to help them, it really exposes their attitudes. Exposes, well, why am I angry at this person when they're actually being nice to me? Should I be angry at this person? Or should I be annoyed? Should I not like this person when they're actually being nice to me from time to time? It can make a very, very powerful example. But there's no room for cliques or unforgiven grievances. We need to be willing to forgive anyone and everyone. God forgives us, and we should forgive them as well. So in this learning to be likable, bear in mind that we will fail. We just simply have to keep trying, and it's something that's grown and developed. I want to leave you with another very interesting scripture. Luke chapter 2 and verse 52. Luke chapter 2. And verse 52. Ultimately, we're to follow Jesus Christ's example, but this is a very, you may not have ever noticed this before in Luke chapter 2 and verse 52. This is just after he got lost on the way back from Jerusalem, and he was in the temple. His parents found him in the temple. He was only 12 years old, and so the next follows on with the events in his life after that. And Jesus increased in wisdom, obviously, he increased in wisdom and stature. Most teenagers, they increase in size. I was not one of those teenagers, but Jesus Christ apparently was one of those teenagers, increased in size. That's fairly obvious. And in favour with God and with man. So even Jesus Christ, even the Son of God, had to increase in likability, in this favour or likability with men. It was something that even the Son of God had to work on. And so it's not going to come easy. Don't think that it is. It is something that very, very simple, that just comes. These conversations, all of this effort, all this kindness, it all takes effort and work. It's not something that's as that easy to do. It actually takes an enormous amount of effort. Now, the word favour here actually means, it comes from it's a very interesting word. It comes from a Greek word, which I'm not going to pronounce. I tried to pronounce this once and the audience laughed at me. And so it's spelled Charis. And that Greek word is actually the source of the English word charisma. So you've heard the expression that this guy has charisma, or this woman has charisma. Jesus Christ, while he was working at growing in likability, he reached the point where he wasn't just likable, he was actually charismatic. And so that can be the very, very lofty goal that we're striving to reach for. Try to be just a little bit charismatic. And then if you can achieve that, try and be a little more charismatic. Charismatic is a person who possesses special traits that attract, inspire, or fascinate other people. So in order to do that, we have to be highly likable. It's a highly likable personality. And when you read about Jesus Christ and the point that he reached, people were drawn to him. He had little children that would come and want to associate with him, and he would accept them. He was wanting to feed thousands of people that he was speaking to. He had people attracted to him because of the fact that he spent the time growing in this favour and this charisma. He did that by following biblical wisdom. It says here he grew in wisdom, and that's all of these points that we've spoken about today. He learned to relate to all kinds of people. He related to little children, the multitudes, Samaritans, sinners. He showed godly love. Obviously, he was God. He was the Son of God. He showed love and real interest in the other person. He was kind. He healed everyone that came into contact with him, and he was dependable. He was actually perfect. Perfect. He had perfect character, and he was even able to learn how to build bridges with people. But the thing is that he had to grow in all of these things. And after hearing this Bible study, what is your likability score now? And do you want to keep it the same, or do you want to actually lift it to the next level? Are you interested in improving that score with people that you hardly know? And what about that person who you're just uncomfortable with? Do you want to try and build a bridge? Do you want to try and win them over to where they are comfortable with you, where you can actually get along with them? Because Jesus Christ, he was able to grow in this highly likable personality, so was Paul. And we can too. Well, that concludes the Bible study. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.